Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening as we are going to talk about unbelievable tips and advice and perspective on how to prepare for college as a remote or hybrid high school student. We know that this 2020, it's an understatement to say that this has been a challenging year. And the first semester of many students' junior or senior year in high school has kind of coming to an end. And how are you thinking about college and preparation? And do you feel like you're prepared for it? Really trying to help keep you on track. And we have two unbelievable counselors that we'll introduce in a moment. And we have an amazing student who just recently graduated. He, like you, has survived high school in a pandemic and just is about to complete his first semester as a first-year student here at UVM. So wonderful perspective that we have to share with you tonight. A few logistics. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. You can put any questions in the chat box. We will incorporate those questions throughout the presentation and make sure there's time to get your questions answered towards the end of the presentation. We are recording this. We will share it out with anyone who has RSVP'd. If you aren't sure if you RSVP'd, to make sure you are on that list to receive the recording, please do send us an email. One of my team members here, Kelly, will put our email address up into the chat box. We're really happy that you are here with us tonight. Quick agenda review. I'm going to go over introductions. You're going to meet all these incredible people who are here with us tonight. We're going to talk about adaptability and resilience. We know that you understand the meaning of those in terms of what we've been through this year. And then we're going to really dive down deeper into things that are actionable items, things that you could be looking forward to as you're considering that next steps moving towards your college career in the various different grades. And we absolutely have tips for 9th and 10th graders as well. And we're going to hear a lot from Elias tonight, our student. And also just a quick check on admissions. You know, what's going on? What are the resources available for UVM admissions, and what are some other sites out there and resources so that students can really get the full picture of the college experience? And we're going to have lots of resources for parents and students tonight. My name is Nicola Willie-Fenton. I am the content marketer in our continuing and distance education department, and I'm super happy to have you here with us tonight. Patty Tomashot is joining us again. She keeps coming back to do this again with us, which is so wonderful. Patty, thank you so much. She's a school counselor director at Stowe High School, and she has a wealth of experience to guide you on this path tonight. And Bruce Barton, he is also one of our tried and true and such an amazing supporter of students and our programs here at UVM. Bruce is the Director of College Counseling at Holderness. Bruce, thank you again for joining us. And we also have, I'm so excited that Elias is with us. Elias Adler in Rochester, New York. He's gone home because campuses are closed essentially again. Students finished out the semester after Thanksgiving break back at home. And Elias is almost done. Tomorrow is his last day to turn in all his exam work and papers, and then he will have his first semester as a college student under his belt. So I'm so proud of you and so excited to hear your perspective tonight, Elias. So I'm going to start with, we have so much great information, so let's dive in. I'm going to start with Patty. You work with so many different grades, all of the students, but let's start with a little bit more of the immediate. You know, the 12th graders are getting a little nervous. They're sweating a little bit, thinking, what can I be doing? What should I be doing? What else can I be checking off the list? So Patty, why don't you take us through some of this first information, and then we'll hear from Bruce.
Sure, sounds great. Hey, thanks everybody for attending, and Elias, we're so thrilled that you're here too, and to hear the student perspective. So for 12th graders, there's certainly some immediate to-dos, and for those of you that haven't already applied early action for that November 1st date, these are some things that you can get going for those that are applying a little bit later. And the first is to finalize your teacher recommendations, and what we mean by that is making sure that you've already connected with teachers that you would like to write you a letter of recommendation. We always encourage you to find a teacher that can write about you as a learner as well as a person. You don't have to pick a teacher where, you've got, a straight A's in the class. Again, it's about who are you as a person, who are you as a learner, how have you grown? Those are the most important kinds of letters of recommendation to have written. Certainly fine-tuning your essays. If you're using your common application, we're hoping at this point you've already dug into that, worked on those essays, fine-tuning them. As we do know, some colleges have supplemental essays, so this is another good time to really work on those and fine-tune those and make sure they sound the way that you would like to be heard. Third, going over your application, constantly looking through your application to make sure that it's filled out completely, that there are no errors in it. Certainly if you're using the coalition or other applications that some universities have their own, you want to keep going through those and making sure that all the information is there and you have added all the things that you want to make sure that are in there so that the school gets a complete picture of who you are. Your financial aid material, hopefully at this point you've already looked at your FAFSA, filled that out. There's the CSS profile that is also quite useful, and some colleges do require that. So at this point, it's good to be working on that if it's not already done. The Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, VSAC, is a super great organization and resources that can help as well, in addition to your school counselor. We also want to encourage you to certainly reach out and seek out any adult that you feel that you can really trust and can give you some direct feedback, especially when you get stuck, or especially if you want someone to take a look at your essay, or would you mind taking a look at my common application? Really feel comfortable to try to reach out to folks that can help, guide you along the way, and ask for help. There's nothing to be embarrassed about for asking for help. Your school counselor is there for you. They're more than willing to help you, as well as, your teachers at your school. And then, another last tip that we wanted to share with you is it certainly doesn't hurt to find someone that you can bounce ideas off of. Many times you do an essay and then you look back at it and you might think, I'm not really comfortable with it. I think I want to write about something different, or whatever it might be. It never hurts to bounce some ideas off someone that you trust, a friend, a partner, school counselor that could give you some other ideas.
Information. Here's some final thoughts for the 12th grade group. And you want to obviously continue to do well in your courses. We're coming to the end if students haven't already arrived at the completion of their first semester. And you always want to be in the context of applying and putting your best foot forward. And we've labeled that here as turn to the positive instead of pull to the negative. You want to be presenting to any college or university to which you're applying the best you that there is. There are some things for you to consider post submission of applications. It is important for you in advance even, but certainly after you submit, and so you're an active candidate under consideration. So really look at, review, read all correspondences from your college. This is oftentimes an underrated suggestion. And part of what informs our sharing this with you is the colleges, not all of them, and to varying degrees of specificity, but colleges often track, if you're an active applicant or even a prospective applicant, whether you are in fact reading the things that they are sending to you. And some of them have data that goes so deep as to suggest how long you're spending looking at the material they're sending to you. So you absolutely want to be paying attention to those emails. They are not to be ignored, it seems to me, if you're doing this process and doing it right. The financial aid paperwork can be a real paper chase. Patty mentioned it in the first slide. I just want to reinforce it because it's such a critical element for students and families. If you're applying for financial aid, you really want to make sure your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. I will also say this in support of financial aid applications, that wherever you're submitting material to whatever school, there's a financial aid office, and those folks are allies. They are friends. They should never be seen as a group of people standing guard over a pile of money that they really don't want to hand over to students. In fact, in my experience over 30 years in this business, they are precisely the opposite. They want to make sure that this experience can work for as many people as possible. So if you hit a snag with regard to financial aid, use the financial aid office at any of the colleges you're applying to. They're wonderful people and a terrific resource. You want to make sure you're updating any system you're using. If your high school uses a system, for instance, mine uses Naviance, and you're changing your list in some way, you want to make sure you do that. Review college updates. We've mentioned this, but as things roll and you're admitted and potentially an enrolled student, you're going to start getting emails. Again, not to be ignored. These will be about course selections as well as dormitory residential life. And so you want to make sure you're paying attention to those at the places you matriculate. Sometimes students think, oh, wow, I'm in, it's April 1st, I'm all set, I've put in my deposit, and now I can just go on and start thinking about the summer and not worry about the college or university until August. Well, there's a lot that happens before you start arriving in August. So there are some final tips if you're in the 12th grade.
And Bruce, do you want to keep going on this, or Patty, do you want to share a little bit more about these workshop topics?
I'd love to just jump in here and say, just remind students who are still in the process of applying, and for those who are well in advance of their applications, that an application to a college or university is largely data until you get to the essay. And so therefore the essay becomes a way for students and applicants to really let admissions offices know who they are beyond the numbers. And Patty mentioned partnering with a friend, maybe a trusted adult that could be a mom or dad or an aunt or uncle or sister or brother. But part of that conversation, I think, should be around the essay. And I like to suggest to students that, you have 2 or 3 things that you want to share with a college or university that are fundamental to who you are. If you know me, you know this about me, and that hopefully emerges in some way, shape, or form in the context of your essay. You do not really have to look at this as a marketing exercise. How do I give you an elevator pitch that's going to get me in? Rather, this is who I am beyond all those numbers that you're processing. If you knew me well, here's what you get. And making sure that your essays are hitting those points is for me part of what the power of that essay can be when it comes to submitting it along with your other data. And Patty, I'm sure you have some thoughts on it too, but that's my quick thought on the essay.
I always tell students similarly that the essay is a way for college admissions officers to get to know who you are as a person. And Bruce, I smiled when you said the financial aid folks are great people. And I was going to say the admission folks are exactly the same. Everyone just wants to get to know you. There isn't a judgment per se. It's really like the essay, talk about yourself. Let them get to know who you are. And remember, they're reading those and they're getting to know you. They're getting to know how you would fit with that incoming cohort that they will be accepting for the fall. So it isn't meant to feel like this sort of high stakes, get very nervous about it. Again, speak from your heart, speak about who you are as a person, and that essay should flow accordingly.
And I know Bruce is, hang on one sec, Bruce, you're muted. There we go. Share with us again. Keep going, Bruce.
Sorry, no, one rabbit hole sometimes that Patty triggered for me, that the rabbit hole that students jump into is they think they have to be doing something to change the world in order to write an effective essay. Whatever it is you're spending time doing, that's what the college is interested in, or university. Just tell them how you spend your time and why that's meaningful for you. Don't worry that you have to be, curing some ill of our society, of which there are plenty. Just as Patty said, who are you? And I think we could tell who we are by how we spend our free time.
Really good point.
Exactly. I think the most compelling essay that was written that it was actually a mission officer that wrote to me and said that the essay that they received from one of my students was about their experience of having a part-time job for 4 years, how it taught them about being on time, how it taught them responsibility, how it taught them about customer service, how it taught them that when you make a mistake, you own up to it and you try to fix it. And this was one of the best essays. And as Bruce said, it's not moving a mountain. It's just talking about what you've done and how you've learned from it, how you're growing with that, and how you're going to move forward.
Such good advice. I hope everyone's really taking this in, because if only I had this advice when I was faced with those essays. So really appreciate your perspective today. And so talking about, and we're going to, Elias, you're on deck too. So we're going to come over to you, because I want to, next after Patty and Bruce talks a little bit about building those lists, I really want to hear how did you approach this? So no, we're coming to you next. And so you've talked so much about the things that 12th graders need to be doing, can be doing, but we also have on here 11th or 12th graders. So these are things that juniors in high school can be thinking about too. Or if you are not yet in the college process as a senior in high school, start. You know, these are advices and tips that you can use at any point. So either one, I'm not sure if Patty or Bruce, you want to walk us through a little bit of this before we hear from Elias.
Yeah, this is one of the common workshops that we do over at Stowe High School. I'm sure in many high schools do this as well. And certainly we've been doing them virtual during this pandemic, just like we did the college essay one. But we always start with identifying strengths and your values. When I say values, I say core values, because it's really important to be clear on what's important to you. Also be clear on your strengths, but what is important to you? Because remember, when you pick a college, it's got to be a good fit for you. You always hear about the opposite, that you're going to be a good fit for the college. But remember, you're the consumer. And so that choice that you pick should be one that matches your core values. And we have several exercises that we do with students to get to that. Now, it takes a little bit more homework or more work to get to do that, and then start building that college list. But we always feel strongly that if you start with your core values and your strengths and desires, that'll be your sort of springboard for then building your list. And then we move into discovering your preferences for college life. There's so many things to think about, not only just geographically, but, a size of a school, the kinds of students that go there, majors or activities, those sorts of things. Most schools have their own mission statement, so it's important to take a look at that as well and see again if that matches with your core values. There's lots of different sources for finding information about colleges, a lot of different search engines out there. In addition, if you have Naviance, you can use the Supermatch and the college search engine that goes along with that particular product. We do encourage you to go directly onto college sites as well, looking at their sites, looking at their incoming class profile. What were the kinds of students that were admitted this last go around? Most schools have their incoming class profile. That'll give you an idea. But once you start narrowing down, or I should say building your list and then starting to narrow it down, then it really is important to go right directly to the site itself and do some exploring through there, since it's quite difficult right now to even get on any college campus at this point. Bruce, feel free to chime in as I'm talking here.
And then also thinking about, we're starting to kind of weave in the junior year, and things like that. And I want to get there in just a moment, but I want to recognize that Elias just finished his senior year. Half of that senior year in high school was hybrid or fully remote, probably fully remote at that point. So a lot of the things that we're talking about, you likely had already done. And so try to go back a little bit farther. What are some of these tips that you're hearing tonight that really helped you, and that you would want to make sure that people listening, that they're really grabbing onto this tip or that tip and those action items? What are your thoughts on that, Elias?
Yeah, well, I want to start by saying, I really wish I had all this advice when I was applying to college. This is really, really fantastic.
Right?
Thank you. There's one thing that really resonated with me, and one thing that was so invaluable to me picking not just a school that fit for me, but made the whole process more comfortable, and that was my admissions officers. my admissions officers were really one of my like primary plugs into what a school is. And it is so important to prioritize making connections with them because they are there for you. They're not, again, they're not these guardians, you know, with a lock, making sure you don't get into their school unless you prove that you're good enough. You know, these are people that are really want to engage with you. And I think some of the best advice and some of the best information about colleges I gained was from admissions officers. And that can be done through email. They're very accessible, which is great. So I think prioritizing your relationship with admissions officers is going to be huge. It's going to make me feel more comfortable, a little bit more informed. And lastly, it's going to help you make preliminary connections. And you never know when you might need them in the future. So admissions officers is huge. Another thing that Mr. Barton mentioned, which I think is important and is often overlooked, is actually about emails. So I'm 18 years old. I'm still new to email. Email is not how I communicate with people most of the time. And you're going to get a copious amount of emails from all colleges, really. So what's so important, one thing that thankfully I learned from my parents who use email a lot is that you need to make folders or at least prioritize emails that you know are important. And when I say this, there's a lot of important emails and a lot of important information, and it's very easy just to hit delete, 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 delete. I fell into that trap kind of my junior year. So really see those emails, see what's important, kind of sort them into folders. Folders are really, really helpful. And you're gonna get a lot of useful information. It's gonna really get you ahead because I guarantee you there's gonna be a lot of kids who totally disregard the emails and just say, I'll figure it out when I get there. If you really absorb the information, this is important information, you're gonna have a really big leg up. So those are two things. And then one last thing I wanted to mention was finding the college that's right for you is really, there is no right answer, but there are better answers than others. Once you've really kind of gotten past a certain criteria, the size, the location, the majors offered, things like that, you're going to have probably maybe 2 to 5 schools. And it's so important not to get stressed out at picking the only one. Because if you go to any of those schools and they meet your criteria, you're going to figure it out and you're actually going to have a great experience if you make it that way. So UVM was a great choice for me, but there are other schools that I think would have also been really, really great. And they're the ones that passed the criteria and kind of made it to the final list. So don't get too stressed out with picking the one school because every school has teachers, every school has classrooms, and every school has resources. It's just picking the ones that meet your criteria and choosing among them. And at that point, when you're down to your last 3, it's really just your gut instinct. And that's what helped me make a really great choice.
Such great advice. Thank you, Elias. And I also think too, there's transfer, so if you're in a situation that is, you made all those choices, you went down all this path and you think that you made the right choice for you, and it still doesn't feel comfortable, you're not locked in. There's many students that transfer into UVM. I actually started at one school and then transferred to a school in Ohio. And so, and it's doable, it's fine. I think you're also learning about yourself on this journey as well. So I think that's an important thing to think about too. So awesome, thank you. And we have a lot more questions for you, Elias, so don't go anywhere. So we wanted to dive back into, okay, so seniors, you got a lot of work still to do. You've heard from Elias, you've got those emails, you got to start bucketing and putting them in folders and paying attention to them. Maybe even setting aside some time for yourself when you're going to look at those and weed out the important information. What are 11th graders? Bruce, what do you want them to work on next?
Well, this slide really presents a whole bunch of important information, and I'm sure students and parents can look this over and make some of their own judgments with regard to it. But to highlight just a couple of things here on this slide, the courses that you're taking and the performances that you're having in class inform probably the most reasonable and accurate data that a college or university will assess. So make sure you're paying attention there and not letting yourself drift off in some way. You want to be involved. Colleges and universities are looking for students who have, and the word admissions office is used here, is impact. And the one way that you have impact with regard to your campus is involvement. Standardized testing is still very much in flux. And while it's hard to forecast, where things will be for 11th graders, I think it reasonable to assume that when you come to your senior year, there will be the availability of standardized testing, but that colleges and universities are also going to be compassionate and understanding about how difficult it has been or might be to gather large numbers for standardized testing. So one of the factors for the high school class of 2021, which I think will still be in play for 2022, is a relaxing of the standardized testing requirements that have been in place for the vast majority of colleges and universities across the United States. That is a forecast. If I was really good at forecasting, I'd go to Vegas myself, so I don't know that you can quite take it to the bank. But my guess is here there's still going to be some fluidity, so you don't need to stress too much about standardized testing. And even in pre-COVID times, of the 4,000 plus colleges and universities in the United States, roughly a quarter do not require students to submit standardized testing. You want to consider, if you're thinking about college, and Patty laid out some really good things at the outset in one of the workshops, or several of the workshops that she does at Stowe High School, of how to list your values and what your strengths are as a person and so forth. It may be that one of the things that you have to think about is, how am I going to pay for all of this? And so considering multiple pathways to achieve your goal, which is to graduate from college and be an attractive candidate in the workforce so that you can make a living and contribute. There's not one path on how to do that. There are no doubt at your high school all kinds of workshops going on about building college lists, writing a college essay, starting in on the Common Application. So you want to pay attention to that. I do want to go backwards just for a second, Nicole, if I can, and say, Patty mentioned what I think is one of the best, although it's not particularly flashy, things a student can do with regard to finding out what is the flavor of this school or university. I recommend two things to my students. Patty mentioned one, going back and reading the school's mission statement. Again, this isn't the sort of sexiest thing you can do to find out about a school, but if you really want to know what a school is at its best, what it's striving to be and to do, their mission statement will have that. A second thing is to ask a current student, or if you're in a virtual session with a college rep, what are the hot button issues going on campus right now? What is it that is energizing the student body at College X? That will give you some insight really too into what the flavor of that particular school is. So just to underscore those things that Patty mentioned in the previous slide might be helpful for students.
So good. I hadn't even thought about asking about, what are students writing about, and picking up the student newspapers and things like that, I think are really important tips that I didn't have. So great. Thank you so much. Patty, do you want to share a little bit of what advice that you give to some younger students? Because oftentimes, I have no doubt you both are talking to 9th and 10th graders as well about things that you could be doing. It's not too early to start thinking about that resume, which I love the idea of that.
Yeah, it's always about, you see that same first bullet again, continue to do well in classes. And we say that because we want you to get comfortable with, in 9th grade and 10th grade, is to reach out to your faculty, reach out to your teachers if you're confused, you're not doing well, you don't be embarrassed to ask for that help. And the reason for that is so that you learn those advocacy skills. So when you get to be in 11th and 12th grade, you're building on those. And then when you do go to college, you're going to have lots of practice in how to reach out. So continuing to do well. We have here reviewing your course choices with the counselor. And this is where, most high school students, usually by February, March, you start thinking about the next year and what courses should you be taking. And it's a good conversation to have with your counselor and certainly your parent and guardian as well, so that you can determine, is there a certain class you want to take your senior year but there's some prerequisites that you hadn't thought about. So it's reviewing them, it's prepping, it's getting an idea of what you might be interested in. What we do know is in ninth grade, you may have very different interests once you get to 11th grade. So with that, it does pay to spend some time on exploring your interests. And there's lots of different tools that can do some interest inventories for you that you can connect to careers. It's not that you have to select a career. It's just there, again, to start getting you to start thinking, start looking at what your interests are. What strengths do you have? What areas would you like to learn more about? That's what this 9th and 10th and usually the beginning 11th grade is really good for. The resume piece, I wanted to jump on that one because I typically have 9th graders start a resume and they always look at me and go, well, I don't have anything to write on it. Well, there's a great template that we use and it's really there to start just recording what's happening. Like, are you in a club? Are you playing a sport? Do you have a part-time job? And other things that also go along into that resume. And we say start it in 9th grade so that you keep adding to it 10th grade and 11th grade. And then when you get to 12th grade and it comes time where you're entering activities or, any other those sorts of things that you put into your resume, it's already there in front of you. You don't have to scratch your head and figure, oh gosh, what did I do sophomore year? And I don't remember, did I get an award or did I, what did I do? That resume is really meant to be built. And we will fine tune it with you, but it never is too early to start keeping track of your activities, your community service hours, all of that. Yeah.
So good. And I want to pause there just for a second because I want to see, Elias, I know you were very active. You interest in music, you played drums, ran cross country. I think you might have had a part-time job as well. So share with us, how did you balance all of that? And was it very purposeful that you were adding these different extracurricular activities to build your candidacy, or are these just your areas of interest and that all kind of worked in your favor as well?
That's a great question. So I was one of the few students that usually decided to do music or sports in high school, and I decided to do both. And at times that got pretty stressful, but I never had in mind, I'm going to play this sport so it looks good on my college application. I'm going to play music so that admissions officers will like me. I'm really doing things that I want to do. I think one of the best ways to advertise yourself to colleges is not to advertise yourself at all. It's to be authentic and to do what really makes you happy. Now, if you don't want to do anything, then that's kind of a different thing. I think it's really important to get involved because high school is a great place. It's a great place to discover interest. I realize that music is something I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life. It's not going to be my career, but it's something that I'm going to participate in. I'm going to get involved in. I'm going to meet people in that field. So I encourage all high school students to do whatever they have time for because it is really invaluable, some of the experiences you will have. The balancing for me was difficult, and I think that made me a lot better as a person and as a student and as a teenager. I mean, balancing school and sports and music, if you can do that in high school, college is a lot easier. So I encourage you to fill your plate up. Obviously, you want to not be stressed and you want to have time to be a kid because that's really important too. But being a kid is not just about not doing anything. Being a kid is getting involved with stuff. And I think my involvement with many things in high school really helped me kind of become this diversified individual and someone who has kind of multiple skill sets and who can communicate with people in different fields. So that's what I would say about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to just kind of zip over this because I think we've touched on a lot of these things, and I'm realizing how fast the clock is ticking here, and there's so much more great information to get to, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. Again, our viewers on YouTube, if you have questions, please do put them in because we're happy to pause and get those answered. Because I think this next couple of slides, Bruce, I know that we have talked a lot about this, and Elias, I'm going to cue you up to be on deck again too, because what are some things that you did? And then I know we've talked about pre-college and the courses that you took this past summer and spring and various different things. So we'll talk about that in a second. But Bruce, How are we finding opportunity? How are we finding light? How are we finding the opportunity in hardship? And I think sometimes what I love about this list is that it could be something maybe that you were always interested in. And now is the time you're saying, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to take this opportunity of still, somewhat being quarantined and not able to do as much to finally learn CPR or learn sign language or do something. How do you encourage your students to go through some of this information here and find that opportunity?
I think it's one of the hardest things to do in this process, and quite frankly in life, is when things are difficult, to work through the difficulty to the point where you're seeing what the opportunities are in the midst of that difficulty. So working mentally to try to push past where the easier route to go, which is in the course of hybrid learning or remote learning. And since this awful COVID pandemic struck us all last spring, to say, here we are, we're in this, then there's nothing that is going to change it until that, thankfully, the smart people who've put together a vaccine and have it just about at our doorstep and ready to implement to really bring us back to some level of normality. How do I take advantage, if you will, of this opportunity? Perhaps it's self-improvement. Perhaps it's community engagement as best you can do and do it safely. Perhaps it is developing an entirely new skill set or an idea that you wanted to pursue. I think the biggest takeaway from this is trying to steer clear of, oh my God, this is so terrible, and I'm going to be paralyzed until we're back to normal. There are tons of things to do. There are terrific resources out there, electronically, certainly through family, friends, trusted mentors and adults in your life for suggestions. We've listed a few here. The bigger takeaway is don't be idle, don't sit still. How can you move forward? And as Patty mentioned earlier with regard to your resume, well, one sure reaction to a limited resume is to say, what could I be doing? And as Elias said earlier, what could I be doing that is interesting to me? You never want to fill a resume solely from the standpoint of how might I impress somebody? And in this case, it's impress somebody in a college office. Rather, it should be authentic, was the word Elias used, and I would strongly endorse. What do I like to do? Or what would I like to do that I perhaps didn't have time for before? And now I do have time. And I do think even with the vaccine around the corner, we're still going to be hybrid/remote, chances are, through much of the spring, if not all of it, in our schools in the early phases of 2021. So work past the disappointment, trust in some folks, talk to some people who know you, who can give you suggestions about, I've always saw you as someone who liked to tinker and put things together. Have you ever thought about doing this or that? Obviously, your high school guidance counselor can be a resource, or a trusted teacher, or mom, dad, aunt, uncle, older brother or sister, etc. But just work through it and see if you can find opportunity. I will tell you, this is true for all of us. It's not just about students or 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. It's for all of us to do. The COVID pandemic has really forced us all to try to find the good in all of this disappointment and disruption.
So well said. Thank you so much, Bruce. I'm going to ask you, Elias, what you were, end of your senior year. It should have been proms and graduations and wonderful family celebrations and so many fun things that you looked forward to. And here you were, remote student and finishing up your senior year in high school that you worked so hard for. Not like you planned. And I know from speaking with you previously, you decided to take a pre-college class in the summer and you looked for opportunities. How did you How did you do some of the things that Bruce is talking about? Is finding that kind of inner strength to look past some of the hardship and look for the opportunity?
Yeah, well, I want to start first that, my heart goes out to all the seniors right now. I mean, this is not what seniors are supposed to be, and it is okay to accept that and to complain about that for a little bit. I certainly did. I think the big overarching theme of what we're talking about here is creating structure in kind of an unstructured environment. At this point, I mean, the first probably month, the school was scrambling and they didn't really know what to do. So we had all this free time, and that can drive people a little bit crazy. So creating a structure for yourself, and not just a structure of just classes, structures of things that interest you. The COVID-19 pandemic, we've lost a lot of control over a lot of our aspects of our lives. So it's so important to make the most of what you can control. And that is, you can still explore your interests at home, and you can still try new things at home, and you can still create a structure that's fulfilling to you at home. And creating that structure is really important. So something I did was I decided to take a pre-college class because I really wanted to make some more preliminary connections to the school I was attending. And I did. I met a lot of students. I met a lot of great faculty. And that's really benefited me. And it kept me busy. And although the class was hard and sometimes I didn't feel like waking up and writing an essay, there's this overarching satisfaction that you get. It's not immediate, but you reap the benefits of it a lot later. So I encourage you to create structure in your day that isn't just laying around. It's something, exploring your interests, doing things that are hard. One thing that's hard every day really makes a difference. And you're gonna feel a lot better. You're gonna have more energy. You're gonna have more optimism. So that's how I handled it.
You did it so well, and you're such a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And we have a question for you, Elias, too, that popped in. Claire is asking, she's saying, amazing job. So there's that. And she's wondering how your first semester at UVM was. How was that transition from high school to college and you came on campus, there was a variety of different things that you could choose for this year. How was that transition this year for you?
The transition was, it wasn't perfect, but it was good. Really quick, so we just have time to talk about other things, obviously. College, again, is a time where you just have a lot of unstructured time, and filling that up with things that were productive and things that were enjoyable and things that, helped me advance and explore my interests was the real challenge. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to meet people. So in a pandemic, I think I really relied on the faculty and the teachers at the beginning. Throughout this first semester, I've gotten a lot better at self-advocacy. And that's been probably the most advantageous trait that I've developed this semester. So at the first 2 weeks, it was a little bit crazy. I'm not going to lie. But the important thing is to hang on, because it does get better. You do get adjusted. So the first 2 weeks, coming, from spending 6 months of intense time with my family to leaving completely in this totally new foreign environment, it was a little bit of a shock to the system. But if you really rely on the people that are there to help you, it gets a lot easier.
So well said. And I have a slide up here. I'm just going to zip over just the resources available. And Elias looked at this stuff and had to do the virtual campus tours and probably video chats with current students. And all of these things are available as well. And so I wanted to, I know, Patty, you haven't had a chance to talk in a little bit. And so maybe give us some insight as to maybe even just, some feedback on what Elias is experiencing and what you're seeing with your students, as well as they are kind of thinking about their transitions and questions that they may have. What's percolating over at Stowe High School?
I think I would like Elias to come and speak to our students. I think everything that you said, Elias, it would be so comforting for students to hear. I would say that the entering the school year this year in a hybrid model sounds very similar to what you felt that our students were feeling. What is this about? How do I stay engaged? How do I stay motivated? I'm in 2 days, I'm out 2 days, and so on and so forth. But I think you're right, Elias, in that you sort of have to kind of just stick through it, and it's not easy, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what we're finding is, our teachers want to hear from their students. They're reaching out to students. Students are reaching out to our teachers, and that relationship is certainly growing and building. So I always think, anytime we have adversity, there's also opportunities to grow and learn. Anytime we make a mistake, as I say to students, that's an opportunity that you've learned and you can grow from that. So everything that Elias, you're saying, we're seeing it certainly at our school. Granted, it's high school, it's different. You can go home at the end of the day and see your family. I think there's still there's worry about the health of all of us, and that is going to be there for some time. But I think getting through it, working together, talking to each other, continuing to make those connections virtually and other ways that we're trying to do at our school is certainly helping.
Good point. Thank you so much. And I bet Elias probably will go talk to your students. He'd probably be willing to do that. He's going to have a little
love that.
Yeah, a little bit of a break now that you're hopefully done after tomorrow, passing in those papers. And so I know, Bruce and Patty, you always put together such an amazing list of resources for parents. And so, I'll just kind of zip over some of these. This is the one that I wanted to pause on because, Bruce, you always have such great advice here and tips. And we've talked about the importance of that college essay, but don't feel like you've got to do it alone. These are some great resources. Do you want to just touch on some of the things that we're seeing here for parents and students?
Sure. The previous slide had a whole bunch of great resources for doing the early investigation with regard to forming a college list. Obviously, any college or university website, you can do virtual tours and all that good kind of stuff too. Here, specifically, I highlight the second bullet on this slide in saying there's a fellow named Ethan Sawyer out of Southern California who goes by the name The College Essay Guy. He has a book out. He has tremendous online resources that will really help should you find yourself in difficulty with regard to the college application essay. So I've never met him. I've used his material for a long time. I'm not getting paid by him or anything like that. He is a for-fee service, but he has a good bit of material that's up on his website that's for free. The information that he is sharing publicly has tripled for free. The information that he shares for free has tripled since the pandemic struck, which is a testament to his character and personality and his desire to help. And so there are tons of good resources out there. It wouldn't be a bad idea, I think, for those in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade to do a little bit of career indexing, maybe take an online survey that will help direct you in ways that you might not otherwise have self-identified to this point, and we put a resource in there. All of the SAT folks and the ACT folks and the NCAA have tons of information, both COVID related and non-COVID related. So there are lots of good resources, and it's nice to have a few to see that others are recommending, so that you don't just spend again some time waste some time looking at sites that aren't particularly helpful. So hopefully those things that we've listed here will be of some service to you.
And the virtual visits, that's really, I think it's kind of an interesting way to really expand that list, because I think about, I grew up in Vermont and I went to school. I ended up going to school in Ohio. I went sight unseen, 100% sight unseen, right? And you don't have to do that. It's amazing. You really can, you can experience UVM, you can experience schools from anywhere. And so if that's a bonus of what we've been through, I think I imagine that kind of connection for students as they're considering campuses will continue. So I think that's something really interesting that we've seen. I just want to touch on, Elias was talking about a pre-college course, and I touched on that very briefly. Those are courses that students can take. Yes, I've seen some take them in freshman and sophomore year in high school, but the majority of the time it's 11th and 12th graders that are taking pre-college courses. And it is right alongside college students here at UVM. And it's for credit as well. So you're gaining credits before you're even walking in the door at UVM. So you can start with credits under your belt, which is an amazing opportunity. And many, many students in Vermont, and there's similar programs in other states, can take advantage of courses through the dual enrollment program. So it is tuition free via the dual enrollment program. There's some service fees, of course, that apply, but you have the opportunity to take college credit courses at no charge for the tuition, which is unbelievable. And we wish everyone would take advantage of that. And the Summer Academy, we'll talk about that in just a minute as well. But here's just a little bit more information about the dual enrollment, and there's lots and lots of information about this on our website. And you want to talk to Patty and talk to Bruce and talk to your counselors at your schools about this, because that's kind of where you need to start, and then filling out that application and make sure that you're choosing the right course through the dual enrollment program as well. And then Summer Academy is an unbelievable opportunity. It's usually rising juniors or rising seniors that take those courses. And typically it was 2 weeks on campus and 2 weeks online. But we had an amazing experience last year to shift everything online. Our health and medicine, our intro to neuroscience, drones for environmental mapping, all morphed into online courses and were phenomenal. And the Summer Academy courses are geared towards high school students versus the pre-college courses where you are 100% taking a course. Elias can tell you, you're taking a course right along with other college students. And so either pre-college courses or Summer Academy is such an amazing opportunity to get credit, to get experience, and to find that interest area too. Taking a writing course, taking one pre-college student I spoke with, she was taking a nutrition course because it was something she was interested in, and so she wanted to get credit. And on that slide is just the courses that are coming up again for our summer 2021 offering. Elias, I want to come back to you on this because you did take a pre-college course this summer, and it was English, I think it was, creative writing, or an English course, yep. And so this is just a quick screenshot of where you can find the pre-college courses on our website. But what was that like for you? How was that, taking a college course right after you were done with senior year, before you come on campus? What was that like for you?
It was a very, very good opportunity for me to really make human connection. That was the biggest thing. I took written expression is what it was called. It's just like a preliminary English class, just kind of getting the writing juices going. And the course was great. I think I loved the course itself. I thought the content was great. But moreover, having that, what I was talking about structure earlier before, one class is a great way to do that because you're not spending 8 hours taking this class. It's just one class. It's just something to kind of break up your day, and it's something that helps you make connections. It's something that keeps your mind sharp. It's something that really kind of helped me stay in a academic mindset. There's been summers where I don't even pick up a pencil to write anything down. And, you come back and you're at a bit of a rocky start, and especially transition from high school to college, it's kind of a different level of academics. And taking just one class really eases that transition because you know what to expect and you know people there. So that was huge for me. I took it online. It wasn't too much work, but it was enough to keep me busy and keep me engaged. And I really recommend it. You don't need to take 4. You can just take 1, but I recommend it.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that perspective. I was very impressed that you did that after graduating your senior year, a tough way to end the senior year, and you dove right in right before you came to campus. So I do want to just we're going to run out of time here in a few minutes, but just want to put out a plug to our folks on YouTube if there's any additional questions. But I just wanted to, while we're waiting to see if there's any questions, I just wanted to see, Patty and Bruce, you also have Elias here. So are there things that you want to know, that you want to bring back? Let's quiz him a little bit more too. Are there things that you want to bring back and share with your students about his perspective of starting college in a pandemic and ending his senior year and having such a great perspective and refreshing experience?
Well, I will jump in here in the chorus of the Elias bandwagon of fans. I will say my first instinct is, boy, is UVM lucky to have you. I know the opposite is true. too, that you're lucky to have UVM for all the programs and opportunities that it offers. I'm curious, and I want to say too that I thought your remarks were, every one of your remarks was spot on, and nothing better than when you appealed to current students and said, you know, it's okay to feel bad about where we are because it's not great. The issue is not to live there, and I'm paraphrasing you, but that's essentially what you said, and I appreciate that very much. I'm curious about all the sort of non-academic elements to your life at UVM, and how just transitionally, I know you've spoken a little bit to this, but just transitionally, if you're finding if during a pandemic, you're still able to find your way to organizations, to clubs, to activities, those kinds of things at the university, if that was a part of your fall experience too.
Well, thank you, Mr. Barton, for saying all those things. That really means a lot, and I appreciate it. In regard to your question, I think, you know, academics really came first for me. And I think people recognize that. I really was not concerned with getting myself involved in as many things as possible in the first week. You know, I really need to make sure I've read the syllabi. I know my teachers. I know how to access my classes. So I think I really prioritized academics before I even thought about clubs, organizations, things like that. The club fair, despite, you know, pandemic circumstances, was really, really helpful. You can put your name down for as many clubs as you want, and you don't have to join any of them if you don't want to. I put my name down for probably 7 or 8 clubs, and I ended up being active in about 2 or 3 of them. And, you know, it's a really, really great outlet to meet people and to explore your interests. And I think I started doing that kind of after the 3-week mark. I would suggest that you don't try and over-involve yourself in the first 3 weeks of college, because you're trying to adjust your mind and your body to what's going on around you. But once those opportunities arrive and you're comfortable enough to start putting yourself out there, I encourage you to do so as much as possible. You really have to be courageous about that, especially in a pandemic. If this is going on a year from now, then you need to hop on those Zoom calls. They may be a little bit tedious, but it's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to enhance your resume. And that's what college is about. It's not just academics. There's so much more. So to answer your question shortly, I waited 3 weeks and then I started going for it. I'm in the jazz band at UVM. I'm in the running club, and I'm speculating about joining student government. I'm not sure. And yeah, that's what I'd say.
Awesome.
Thanks.
I'm so glad to hear that you joined the band. We talked about that you were considering it. So that's amazing to hear. I wanted to follow up on that. I want to just note that we're just about ending of time, and it looks like our questions are pretty quiet. Thank you all. Thank you again, Patty and Bruce, for just being so willing to share your expertise, your resources, your advice, your perspective. It's so valuable for everybody. And Elias, you're rocking it. We're so proud of you. It's amazing. I'm sure it feels so good to be back with your family and to know that tomorrow at 5 o'clock, you have finished your first semester at UVM. So way to go. I'm sure we'll talk to you again. I wish you all a happy and very healthy and safe holiday season. And thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.